The Garden of Ink and Bones is a monthly podcast about witchcraft, powerful plants, and making magic. I'm Belle of Belladonna and Bones, and I'll be joined by occult artist Rue of Old Omen, and we're witches who like to get our hands dirty. To us, magic is practical, visceral, and bound in blood to the soil and bones of our spiritual allies. It's time to get your hands into the dirt, do the work, make magic, and feel the witchcraft in your bones. Welcome to the Garden of Ink and Bones. Welcome to episode 3 of The Garden of Ink and Bones. I'm Belle, and with me tonight is, as always, Rue. How you going, Rue?
I'm doing great. How about you, Belle?
I'm good. Look, it has been a month of Saturn and Cap. It's been all of the chickens coming home to roost. So all the problems that you've let slide, coming back to bite you, and really showing that we all need to take a little bit more time to be more careful about things, I think.
Oh, definitely, for sure. I know I've been feeling it this past month.
Yep, I've previously had hand troubles, and I've been at the hand therapist again because I haven't been looking after my hands. I've been just on and off sick, and then work issues where people's personal issues have been left to fester, and they haven't been managed properly, have come to light, and they've left. So yeah, it's really a matter of, well, you made your bed. Now it's going to throw itself out the window.
So funny because we've had exactly all the same problems.
Yeah, exactly the same. So last month we worked on tonight we're going to talk about a Saturnine herb. We're going to talk about Belladonna, catch up on what we discussed last month with Skullcap and how we worked with it through the month, and then we'll also talk about how we worked with Jason Miller's protection and reversal magic. We're going to talk about Throwing the Bones by Michelle Jackson, which is a great tiny little tome. So we'll get onto that later. But first of all, let's start with Skullcap. How'd you go with Skullcap this month, Rue?
It was awesome. I tend to use it more for its medicinal properties, which I think you did too, as we discussed earlier. And I got one of my friends to try it too, who'd been having troubles sleeping. And so I mentioned to them, I gave them a little tincture of it and said, next time you have trouble sleeping in the middle of the night where they were just for days, you could not sleep. So I say, go down, try it, 20 drops into a glass of water, and worked wonders for them. So it was really good to hear that sort of little bit of extra opinion on how it went for them. But same thing for me of trying it just to sort of calm your mind a bit more. It's almost like a bit like forced meditation. It just makes you slow down and take a breather, which I think I've really needed this past few weeks, as we've discussed. How about you? How did you find using it this past month?
Yeah, it's again, I use it mainly for its medicinal properties of helping you sort of switch your mind off, and try to let go of the day a bit, because again, just stupid amounts of stuff going on in my life and my work life particularly. So I found that really great. I would take it usually about half an hour before I went to bed. And then by the time I got to bed, I would be doing the 10 count breath. Now, have we talked about Headspace before?
Don't think we have.
So Headspace is an app, and the guy that does it, Andy, well, it's a meditation app, but it's not a woo-woo meditation app. It's a very practical one. It's really meant for people who say they can't meditate and they can't do the whole, close your eyes, relax your breathing, blah, blah, blah. So Andy starts with one of his basic techniques is a 10 count breath, where you just breathe in normally and you breathe out normally, and on the in-breath you count 1, on the out-breath you count 2, and you do that till 10, and then you start again. So it's a really short goal for people, and I highly recommend it. The first He does a lot of 10-minute meditations, and there's a first little guided course part that I think are 10-minute meditations. 10-minute meditations that are just really easy. And if you've never meditated before, or if you're one of those people that say, I can't meditate, or if you've been away for it for a long time, or you say you don't have enough time, I recommend grabbing Headspace. The free versions are great. I have the paid subscription, which is quite pricey, but in my opinion, worth it. But the 10 count breath was what I was doing to get to sleep. And I don't think I would have to do that for very long before I just drifted off. And Skullcap was just an excellent way to really have a dream. And sometimes the dreams would be notable. But I wasn't waking up thinking about work.
Yeah, I found that too, that it's great for falling asleep really easily and really quickly, but you still notice the morning after you feel really quite still relaxed and rested. Even though it's meant to clear out of your system quite quickly, you definitely felt, just like you've let go of everything.
Yeah, and I think that's just by virtue of the fact that you've gotten that night's sleep. I'm sorry if you guys can hear the wind and stuff in the background. I've had to leave the windows open tonight because it is way too hot. So, yeah. What else with Skullcap? I had a bit of the tea, and I really enjoy the tea.
It's got a really nice flavour. It's a real sort of almost grassy, but just a gentle, planty flavour.
Yeah, and it can be quite sweet with the tincture. If you add the tincture into the water, if you want to have cold water, I think actually I might be still using it this week because it's going to be a heck of a couple of weeks. So yeah, but really with that Saturn and Capricorn thing, I think that's one person you should be following is Ivy at Circle Thrice. And she was talking about how Saturn rewards self-care, not, la-di-da self-care. It's really, really down to earth, do the things you're fucking supposed to, eat some veggies, go to bed at a decent hour, set some boundaries, avoid some drama.
It's the stern mother in your life.
Yes, exactly. So it's really good. She writes, it's not the easy kind of self-care. It's not chocolate and bubble bath. It's the juice cleanse, scrubbing the grout kind of self-care. And yeah, taking care of yourself is just as important as taking care of others. So I thought it was a really good newsletter she put out this week. She has some great stuff coming. She is a real practical enchanter. In terms of, she talks about project management and using magic in project management and agile project management. So it's all in my wheelhouse in terms of work. So I think I'm in love. So. The other thing we did this month was we worked with Jason Miller's protection and reversal magic. How'd you go?
I really got some really good results, but I know I've found that every time I've worked with his stuff before. So primarily what I did, and I know we both sort of had our own little separate goals with this one for the month, I was doing a daily banishing and offering, and I tried to do that every single morning, and it was one of those good little ones that sort of helped with that mindfulness of before, of just bringing yourself into the day, knowing what you got to do, doing it before stepping out to work. And I definitely found that the energy around the place kicked up a fair bit more. I definitely got a lot more messages coming through, a lot more activity coming through, more bumps and squeaks in the night and that sort of stuff. But no, I found it had really good effects, and I definitely noticed that it had a noticeable effect on the energy that came out of my spell work, getting much more tangible results and more charged results, being able to ground myself every single day and have that focus. Even if I'm not doing a spell every day, it's still almost like recharging your battery sort of thing. So how about you? What did you get up to?
I was baseline. This month was just, I think, about surviving. So I actually used his visualizations about protection a lot. So I did a lot of the glowing bubbles. I did golden bubbles on my partner because he had to travel to try and give him a comfortable travel experience. He had to travel for work, and it was all the way around the world, 24 hours worth of flights and one each way. And so I was really concerned about him having a comfortable travel experience and not coming back absolutely shattered because he has a health condition that can make, recovering from these things really hard. So I focused a lot on that. So I put a lot of energy into that, and it does seem to have worked. He's back as of last night and seems to be okay, if not a little bit delirious today. So I'm going to chalk that up to a win, but I'll keep monitoring it.
Awesome.
For myself, I did a lot of just none of this is my problem kind of bubbles. I'm not involved. I keep my head down, keep myself out of things bubbles. That was really important this month. So that distraction bubble that just sort of meant that no one came looking for you.
And did you find any sort of result from that? How did you find that sort of showed itself?
I think it showed itself by the drama left my little corner of the world untouched, certainly till the end of this week. And while we're affected by it, we're not caught up in it, and it'll cause us a lot of work to deal with. That's inevitable. And it's part of my ethic that I would always help anyway. So I'm not trying to avoid the work. I was just trying to avoid any blowback from all the drama. So that seemed to work. I also did the invisibility, which was kind of awesome. I wanted to collect something from a plant right across the road from a police station and a court. And just lots and lots of traffic and lots of people, lots of police officers always standing around outside. And I literally wanted to go cut a branch off. It just worked perfectly. I left it, I made it, I wasn't stupid. I didn't go down there at 9 o'clock in the morning when everyone's waiting to go into the court and, everyone's standing around outside. I waited till late in the evening and I went down and I stipped my branch and I collected my berries and I walked away.
Excellent. Because it always looks good.
Left my offering.
Because it always looks good, walking up to a court carrying a hacksaw.
Pair of secateurs. Yeah, someone's going to jump me. I was like, all of a sudden, like, what are you doing? I'm going to cut the jugular with secateurs because he's made me prune my plants. Poetic. Yeah, I'm constantly getting the little notes from the post office and the gas man about pruning my plants. Please cut back your plants. I can't get to your gas meter. Or please cut your plants back from the footpath. And it's like, dude, I don't want to do that. So, yeah.
Awesome. It sounds like it went well.
But that worked really well.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I was really careful because I had to drive around it. So I was really careful to sort of I sprayed myself with some lemon and asafoetida. So I'd mixed up some asafoetida and some lemon peel into a little bit of vodka, and I just sprayed that sort of over my chest and stuff after I was done, so that to sort of get rid of the charm. Yeah, because I really didn't want to have an accident.
Smart thinking.
Yeah, I just went to the things that I always know work in terms of banishings, and asafoetida is one of them. So yeah, I stank. I really stank, which is why I put the lemon in it. But yeah, it goes away.
Strips everything.
So I didn't get to the talisman making again. Crazy month, but I do think that it's definitely in my future.
Yeah, definitely. I just got a new Dremel as well this past month. So Woohoo. I've been playing with a few little things, but your mention of metalworks made me go, what can I engrave around here?
See, another underrated witch's tool.
Awesome. So what are we going to talk about this month?
Well, this month we're going to talk about a book called Bones, Shells and Curios, a contemporary method of casting the bones, written and illustrated by Michelle Jackson. Now, this is a tiny little book. Tops out at 96 pages. It's self-published, has a few typos in it, but they aren't the end of the world. Yeah, I don't have a lot of experience with bone casting, and I've always really wanted to. So I picked this book up a while ago and sort of started collecting things for my bone casting kit, but I've never gotten around to it. But I know you have.
Yeah, so throwing the bones is definitely my favourite method of divination. I've never been analytical enough to wrap my head around the rules of tarot. I just can't absorb that kind of structured knowledge whatsoever. I've tried and tried, but alas, it doesn't work for me. Whereas I've always found myself sort of working with a lot of natural omens that come about in the day, like, oh, there's a crow, how many crows are they? You know, you're 1 for sorrow, 2 for joy, little chant, that sort of thing. Animals, things I come in contact with, things that I find. So throwing the bones just naturally has always sort of made sense. And I like to sort of interpret things a little bit more naturally to myself sort of thing, rather than having something with such a structured meaning. So this little book was absolutely awesome. It's such a gem of a book. It's got a few really, it's less of a dictionary. It's less of a dictionary like some of the other books that you find out there on throwing the bones, and more of a approach on, I think as she says in the book, she will teach you the way of figuring out how to read the bones for yourself, and gives you those tips on how to sort of work through this system, but she won't tell you how to read them because everybody has their own sort of interpretation. And she has a few good little things as well that I hadn't really thought about with my bones before, about setting up, say, because a lot of it is working with your ancestors, so she talks about setting up a little shrine to your ancestor altar to get them to help work with you, as well as when you get your first collection of bones, different ways that you can sort of, I guess, initiate them into your practice of whether that's by smoke or by water or by oils or alcohols, different ways to cleanse them of the energy, or some people like to just leave the energy as they found them because they feel to them that works best. So it definitely had a few little aspects that I'd never thought about before, like, because I've got it in my collection, a few very delicate pieces that can't be put under running water, so her idea of cleansing them with smoke was a really great one, and I'd naturally always sort of have mine on my altar for my ancestors anyway. So yeah, I really, really love this little book. Have you worked through it much at all, or?
No, I think, again, falling into the witch's trap of just collecting all the bits and pieces. I've been, well, basically I can't see something interesting without walking past and picking it up. You know, it's like every feather, every gnarly piece of wood, every, you know, set of seeds or whatever.
I swear being a witch means that you're naturally a hoarder as well.
Yeah, especially of little things. You know, just all the little seeds and berries and bits and pieces. And I think, you know, what attracted me to it, especially with this book, was that she encouraged you, while she says, you know, you can always order bones online, a set online, she encouraged you to introduce things that made sense to you. Like, and I thought, well, you know, to me it makes perfect sense to include things like belladonna berries and rowan berries and rose hips and that very sort of natural herby end of things. So that's part of what I've been doing. Yeah, I think I want to go back to something, because she does talk about that ancestor altar and things like that. And next month we're going to have a bit of a focus on spirits and spirit work in the episode, because we're close to Samhain, Thinning of the Worlds, whatever you want to call it, down here in the Southern Hemisphere. So, yeah, getting that ancestor altar has always been something I really struggled with. I don't have a great relationship. No, I have a really fucking awful relationship with my immediate sort of family. So having that set up was always it felt awkward. So I've always tried to sort of have that vague ancestor altar, and, working with a bit of graveyard dirt and stuff. And it's just really, it's really not taken off for me. I've been able to have spirit altars where I've been able to bring in the plant spirits and things like that. And I think that's what I want to do. I want to focus a bit more on the plant spirits, and have more of a plant spirit altar with my plant spirit allies. And because I'm going to focus my bone set around the plants as well.
Yeah,
so, I think that's how I'm going to.
That's an awesome way of looking at it. And I also think too, well, you never sort of know who's in your past as well. Like, I completely understand that if you've got that immediate family where you don't have a great relationship, there's that blockage there. But whereas I'm quite the opposite of a lot of pretty much my path came from my grandmother and a lot of her superstitions and that. And my whole family, especially on my father's side, are ghost stories and strange occurrences and all that. So I think that's another reason that I've always been so drawn to working with ancestors, is there's always something a little bit strange on my side of the family, so it works really well for me. But I really like that spin on it of working with the plant spirits instead, because in a sense they do become your family when you're working so closely with them.
I think that's it, and I think it's great that we're going to have both of those sort of tactics on it. But there's still lots of really good things in that ancestor altar section in this book. She talks about how to set your little area up, how to do your daily devotions and things like that, and how to reach out to them, different little offerings and things like that. And just saying her key point is that the area should be used to talk to the ancestors and to re-establish a relationship with them if you do not currently have one. She says re-establish because it is her belief that they've always had a relationship with you, whether you were aware of it or not. So there's that aspect of it. Starter sets, and what's in your bone set?
So I like to sort of work with whatever I've just got on hand, because as we've discussed, I'm a bit of a hoarder. You've seen my house. So
mine too.
In my set, I originally started with a set number because I sort of based it around just significant numbers to yourself. Some people have them, some people don't. So I've currently got 13 different things in my set. And what I have is I have a hagstone, which was a gift from a friend, which I use it in a few of my items have different interpretations depending which way they fall, and also what they fall next to, and how I set up the grid, which I'll go to in a second, but I'll go through what I've currently got in my bone set. So I've got a hagstone, which I use for either looking through the veil, because you've got that opening going through, or sometimes as a protection sort of thing. I have a dried rosehip for, love, your relationships, those sorts of things. I've got a little bead that's carved out of ivory that's carved into a skull, which is, pretty much death, which you can have your own different interpretations for it. Not necessarily physical death, but it could be the death of something. It could be ancestors. It could be the bridging of those worlds. It could be many different things. I have a claw from a monitor that I collected that I found hit by a car when I was traveling down south. One of those real big rainbow ones that you see in the forest that are like 3 meters long, and it was just massive and amazing, and couldn't drag the whole thing.
You sent me one of those.
Oh, yep, did I? Yeah, I've got...
Yeah,
there you go. Yeah, I was driving past and saw it, and I was like, there's no way I can fit that thing in my car, so I pulled over and grabbed my secateurs and cut all its claws off. So I've got one of those dried in there, and that's generally for attack. So if there's lands near an issue, it could be this is being attacked by something or someone. I have an echidna quill for defense, because that's what they naturally use them for. I have a piece of buffalo horn that's being carved into a raven, which ravens to me mean messages, normally from the other side. They're one of those animals I'm always keeping an eye out, and when I've had family members pass, like my grandmother, who was quite close to me, remember I woke up that morning and there was an entire murder of crows on the roof of my house just going nuts. There was about 20 of them just circling the house, and I knew something had happened, which she died that morning. So that's my little token for messages, normally from the other sides.
Perfect.
I have a little key, which I think was given to me by my dad a long time ago, and I think it winds up a clock. But it's sort of in my messages, in my readings, I use it sort of as the key to something of, if I've got a problem and I ask about that problem, what's the key to fixing the solution sort of thing. I've got a bell for alert, for cleansing, for all those sorts of things. Got a little coin which has two sides. So normally I use it for male and female, but sometimes I also use it for yes and no, depending on the face it lands up. And I tend to put out that intent before the reading of sometimes I'll change meanings of things depending on the reading and how I'm using them at the time. Got a snail shell that I collected for fertility. So whether it's belly side up or hard defensive face down. So fertile, not fertile. And I've also got a nutmeg, a whole piece of nutmeg, because one, I just absolutely love the smell of freshly ground nutmeg. It's my one little vice. And as well as about growth, again, fertility, all those certain things, or sometimes the seed that's planted or the thing that you need to plant into something to help it grow into an issue sort of thing.
Actually, that's something she mentioned in the book, didn't she? I think it was that sometimes, or maybe I've read it somewhere else. Maybe it was on her Facebook page. She's talking about how sometimes pieces walk in and out of sets.
Yeah.
You know?
And see, I've got a few things as well. Like I've got a certain pair of garnet earrings, and I've had them since I was about 13, and anytime they go missing, something bad is going to happen, and then they just mysteriously reappear. So normally I also have a few little crystals in my set, which at the moment have gone walkabout. So that's my current set of 11 pieces, sorry.
That's crazy. I mean, yeah, I've just been accumulating mine. So, you know, I still haven't used it and really worked it into what things will mean and stuff. So, you know, just things that catch my eye. So I do have a wishbone, chicken wishbone, a kangaroo bone from the reserve near where I live, which I think is going to sort of end up being something about place and your sense of place and that sort of genius loci kind of bioregional, all the buzzwords kind of stuff. And I've collected a copper ring, which obviously someone handmade, which I sort of tend to use. I'm thinking it'll be like a symbol of love, you know, that sort of thing. Because obviously someone made it for someone else. It's very rough, but it sort of works. Some cast bells, definitely going to use one of those in there. And as I was saying, I really want to try and use my herbs, so the belladonna berries and rowan berries and rose hips and hawthorn and blackthorn and a few things like that to come into it as well. So I'm really excited and really grateful to hear what you use each of the pieces for. Sort of gives me an idea of how some of my pieces will come together as well. So you mentioned a grid. What's this grid?
So I've got a few different ones depending on where I'm at the time. I have a cloth that I've made up that I also sometimes use for spell working as well, and it's got pretty much just the compass drawn into it, and I'll delineate in each quarter of the compass either the direction and those properties for the directions, or sometimes I will change that to just named areas. So I might, because every reading is different and I like to sort of never keep it so structured because I'm just not a structured person. So I might put, say, one area in as relationships, one area in as work, one area in as family, one area in as personal life or something like that. And if I'm doing a reading on myself, or I can cater it to other people. Or sometimes I really like, my favourite method is to find a real nice soft piece of earth with real sandy, silty soil where you can sort of draw in it, or sand, where you can draw the grid directly into the ground and set up that circle, or even a spiral, because the spiral to me is another symbol that I use a lot for connecting with other realms to get messages. So pretty much designating a circle before I cast my bones and putting their quarters or what areas I'm working with for that reading.
So with the spiral, how do you is it that the center of the spiral is the center of the issue and then you're working away from it, or how does that work?
With the spiral, I tend to personally, and there's 1,000 ways to skin a cat, just because I do it doesn't mean you have to do it that way too. But I like to,
which is the point of the podcast, right?
Yeah, exactly. I like to just use it as when it's one of those ones where I don't have a specific area I'm looking at and I'm wanting an answer from the other side, then I tend to cast my spiral as to opening the gateways and the channels to communication. So it's more a reading directly from the spirits rather than me reading about certain aspects in life, if that makes sense.
Very nice. Yeah, no, I love it. Michelle mentions a few different types of reading surfaces. She's talked about, there's one she shows which is a big giant sort of batik skull, which looks kind of neat. And she talks about whether there's having some extra cushioning when you throw onto hard surfaces so that you don't break any of the fragile pieces. Not having a really big surface, just really practical little book. Not having a really big throwing cloth if all your pieces in the set are really small. So she said when she first started, she used a cloth with a set of crossed lines on it. I read the pieces in the upper half of the crosses. Let me try again. I read the pieces in the upper half of the cross as things that are happening on a conscious level or in the material world, and pieces in the bottom half as things that are happening on an unconscious level or in the world of spirits. Things of the left were passing away, and things of the right were coming into being. I thought that was really quite good. She said it's very similar to a lot of tarot spreads and card spreads. But yeah, I thought she says just do whatever feels right, whether it's houses of the zodiac, seasons, directions, however it feels right. Like I know I have some of my magic cloths that are complicated, really complicated circles with lots and lots of different runes and different alchemical symbols, because I'm not afraid to mash things together. Never let it be said I let a thing like pridey hold me back. But and knowing that there's I'll have a drawing of an amanita in one area, and I might have a belladonna leaf marked in another area, and I'm really keen to try and use those cloths as well. So
and that's the thing that I really love about it, is it's so completely versatile to working in a sense it works for you. There's no rules about it. They're objects that mean something to you and you alone, and you should be able to interpret those meanings, and you can throw them in whatever way that you want. But yeah, I do like I mentioned that please find a soft surface so you don't wind up breaking anything.
So how do you throw? How do your bits end up on the table?
So if we're going with generally my main one, which is my cloth, like I said, that's got a circle drawn in it, cut into 4 quarters, I tend to ground myself first. Any offerings that I want to make or any opening channels with any spirits that I want to work with at the time. And I tend to sort of try and just unwind a little bit first, meditate, breathe, and then really put my intent and my focus into my hand. I have mine kept in a bag that I've had forever, and so it's sort of like I envision that when I'm putting my hand into the bag, I'm envisioning being able to break through that veil and pull out the messages from the other side. I don't try to grasp absolutely everything. It's whatever falls into my hand is what I need. I don't look at what's in my hand before I cast it, and I tend to try and cast it blindly too, so that it's completely unadulterated by my bias, and that it falls, if things fall out of the circle, then they're not needed in the reading. Say the coin, like I said, it's got 2 sides, so either male or female. So say I'm having, and I feel like there's an issue with someone, there might be a coin comes up, it might come up male side up, there might be, say, the monitor claw next to it, meaning attack. It could be attack to a person or attack from a person. Sometimes you might put a little object in there to be for yourself or for another person, generally the person you're doing the reading for. And I think she mentions that in her book too, that you can have a little doll or something, an object made up, if you're doing a reading for a person, and have them grasp that doll at the time before doing the reading so that their energy is infused into it. So you can then put them into the reading and see how it lays around it. So what falls near each thing sort of tells a story about what's happening, what's all tied together. There's the key that will tell you the key next to this is the key to the solution, and that this, there might be something coming through in the message that, you know, the skull next to the crow might mean that there's a message from an ancestor or someone deceased, that sort of thing. So that's generally how I try and interpret it.
I like that. And I think that, you know, you can even pull more sympathetic magic into, you know, the little dolls. Like if you maybe had a hair from your client or a hair from the, like if it was a relationship reading, you had two little dolls, whether they had a hair or an eyelash from the other person that you could pop in the other doll. Yeah. That would be quite interesting as well. To use to sort of get that.
I know that I heard in the past years ago, and it's always stuck with me, of having the reader having a pendant that they tend to always wear on them, often either a talisman or an amulet, something that's always a part of them, and that generally before they do the reading as well is that they take the pendant off and give it to the person that's the reading's being done for and have them kiss it. Then the reader takes it back and puts that as well into the bag, and they use that often as a sign as well for the person being read, as that's that object that's representing that person, that I've always really liked as well, because it's got your energy in it, which sort of I think helps charge it, and then to have them sort of bless it in a sense sort of brings some of their energy into it as well. But I really love the idea, like you mentioned, of say a piece of their hair is always going to be so potent.
Yeah, especially if it has the root attached. The one thing I did like when she talked about, you know, just after throwing it, does your eye and attention go to a certain area right away? Perhaps that's where the reading should begin. Now, that's what I do with tarot. I often have put out the cards, or even just one card, and I'll say to my client, what do you see first? What stands out to you? And if they sort of say, or where do you see yourself? Look at all these cards. Which person in these cards? Because I tend to use the Victorian Romantic, which is very easy to relate to. You know, where do you see yourself? Which person's you? And, you know, sometimes it's the fainting damsel, and sometimes it's the woman wrestling the lion in strength and things like that. Or even when they're really, really struggling, what colour stands out to you the most? So I like that with this, where, you know, that what draws your attention.
100%. That's a great idea.
Actually doing your reading. Do you do them often, and how often do you do them for others?
Probably do them, if we were going to break it down annually, I'd probably do them for others probably about 5 or 6 times. I do a lot of my practice in general, it's quite personal. So I know I'm always a bit funny about bringing other people into it. I'm always quite fond of doing it. Say, I've got one particular friend in person that, you know, we often do tarot over the phone, tea and tarot days, where, you know, we'll ring each other up and we'll pull a card or do a reading, and sometimes we'll bring out the bones as well and do it that way too. And it's really nice. If she's great with tarot, I'm terrible at tarot, so some days we'll do tarot with her and other days I'll do bone readings with me. But I often just tend to leave it for those times when I'm feeling really, really stuck and without direction, or I'm not sure about something, where I feel like something's going on and I need some clarification. There's always days where I wake up and there's crows cawing and there's a certain amount outside, and it's like one of those little signs that something's going to happen. So that's when I tend to sort of grab them and do a quick little reading. And I've also got a little oracle deck just near my front door too, which I did yesterday morning as well, where some days just before running out the door I'll quickly grab a card, see what it says, and just sort of have that mindfulness through the day. So it's just one of those, I like to do it when I need it sort of things. I don't like to rely on it too heavily and just constantly pestering the spirits with questions.
Yeah, exactly. So one of the great things about this book is that it goes through a bunch of sample readings. A lot of, and it really, I think that really helps you understand it. And it really talks about, it shows you where the pieces were placed, and whether, like she talks about, I'd ignore this piece because it's too far from the client's work, or that we're talking about. And I think that's the really helpful part of this book. It really gives you an idea of how to build your set, and B, how to read it, because it just says, okay, well, this is how I read this throw. And her sets are massive. Like, there has to be...
They are huge. There's some pages you see and there's just so many objects on each one.
Yeah, there has to be 30 or 40 pieces in it, but she doesn't read them all. And I find that interesting as well. She says that if you have a larger set, you have to learn to quickly identify the main points. It's like, wow, I don't know that I could if I throw out 30 things.
Then I like your point that you gave before, like you said, of with you, how you do your tarot reading, what catches your eye? What's the thing that you're really, really drawn to?
Yeah, because there's actually, if you, on page 74, it's her quick daily reading, and she threw it, and there was this really tight cluster that she then focuses on, and how the things have all tightened up. And interestingly, the client piece in this is a raku figurine. Now, raku is a type of pottery. It's a flame-fired pottery, and I do pottery, so I'm really interested in maybe making a few raku pieces to see how they go in there as well. So, but the symbols are really simple. Like, they're not all really detailed pieces. She's got relationship pieces. She's got rough stones, which are an obstacle. There's a head which represents thoughts. She has a lot of shells, about tiny conch shells and cowrie shells for different people, which obviously works for her. I don't think it'll work for me. I don't think I could make the same associations she does.
Yeah, definitely. And that's a good thing, though, is you can just personalize it to yourself. And I know she also had jawbones in there for communication, which reminded me, I remember when I went through and read this book, it reminded me that I've got a little bat jawbone there that I wanted to include into my set as well. But just little things you'll find around the house even just work so perfectly. I don't think you ever really, you can go and buy a set if you feel, but I think there's always something a bit more fun in just seeing what you have around the house and being able to put everything together.
Yeah, and seriously, you're witches. If you haven't been collecting the things that you trip over or catch your eye every day, then you're a different type of witch to me then, because I just can't.
I have so many jars and boxes full of so many things, and I'm like, one day I'll have a use for this, or I could use this and this, and it's just accumulated to hundreds.
Yeah, it's just, and I think that's what makes this so appealing, as a thing. So what are you going to do with this book this month?
So I definitely think I'd want to start trying to do daily readings as well, and probably continue over my practice from Jason Miller's book and try and start including this into it, as well as working with the Skullcap with it. I'd like to start trying to sort of slow my mind a little bit more with the Skullcap before throwing the bones, but I'd like to start looking at her little setups and trying to sort of expand how I read, which ways that I read, including a few more little collection and pieces into it. But I'd definitely like to start her quick little daily one, and just sort of be able to document and see how it all goes. How about you? What are you thinking about doing with yours?
Well, obviously, I just want to start. so that's going to be the first thing I do. Is I'm going to probably start with just a simple cross setup for my cloth and get my bits and pieces together, especially because of work right now. I think a lot of my stuff's going to be focused on work. But also, I really want to offer out some readings, because I always find that's the best way to really get into it, is to do it for other people. Because when you do it for yourself, I think you can become a little bit lax and you can be less spontaneous about things. But I kind of love the idea of, I used to be involved with a tarot forum where you would do 1-card readings, and you'd say, I'm going to do 10 1-card readings, leave your question. And you just do a little paragraph. And I've seen a lot of people doing a similar thing on Instagram. So I think I'm going to do that on our Instagram. I'm going to do, I'll post a call for readings, and I'll just get a small set and or do what you do, which is just reach into the bag and grab a handful of things and throw them out, and see what comes out to me in the interpretation.
That's an awesome idea.
That's what I think I'm going to do.
I absolutely love the idea of that. I'd be so interested to see the response you get from that. And also, just if anyone does do that, I'd love to hear back the accuracy or how it turns out for you.
Yeah, and we encourage others to do it 100%. As well. We can set up a little bit of a reading exchange on Instagram, and everyone can sort of throw their bones, take the little photo, and then do a little, and seriously, just 1 paragraph. It doesn't have to be a long and detailed reading for anyone, based on the question that other people give you.
That sounds great. Yeah, tag us in any readings that you do on Instagram so that we can see what everyone gets up to.
Yeah, really want to see it. And if you already have a practice with the bones, we'd love to hear from you as well. So please drop by our website and leave us a voicemail. Send us an email at questions@gardenofInkandbones.com, or just drop us a line on Facebook or Instagram as well. We'd just love to hear from you. So we'd love to hear about your experiences with the bones and your experiences working with this book, and just anything in general. We'd love to hear from you. So I think that covers the bones.
So moving on to I think one of both of our favourites. I mean, clearly, especially you with the name Belle, Deadly Nightshade.
Yep, Atropa Belladonna, one of the core plants in my garden. There are many nightshades out there, and they're all very different.
I would absolutely love to hear all about your work with Atropa Belladonna.
Yeah, so it's like I said, it's one of those plants that holds a lot of romance for witches. It's the beautiful lady, and it's it entices us. Just like its namesake. In ancient times, we're told that ladies used to use it to dilate their pupils to make themselves more beautiful. Not sure I ever want to try that.
Yeah, I'm not sure about putting such a toxic plant into my eyeballs.
Yeah, actually, you were talking earlier about putting the plant into the eyeballs. What was that about?
So there is this amazing little book, if you can ever get a copy, that I do recommend to anybody that's especially interested in flying ointments. It's called How Do Witches Fly? A Practical Approach to Nocturnal Flights by Alexander Culkin. And it's just like Bones, Shells, and Curios. It's one of those tiny little books that's an absolute beautiful gem of a piece. But it mentions in it that a method to diagnose belladonna poisoning requires that a few drops of urine from the subject are applied to the cat's eye. Exposure to light after 30 minutes will cause dilation of the cat's pupil if belladonna has been ingested. The alkaloid atropine from the ingested plant would be present in the urine and would cause a dilation of the pupils.
Awesome. I know my cat will be up for that.
What a great way to treat your familiar. They're always coming in handy.
Yeah. Actually, in the book, The Long Trip, it's by Paul Deveraux, and it's a prehistory of psychedelia. And that's not what we want to focus on with belladonna, but I'll come back to that. It says that it was known in Old English as Dwayberry, which derives from the Danish Dwayberry, which means tranceberry, which, reveals its hallucinogenic effects. So, you know, they're all solanaceae, and we know that they all have high tropane alkaloids in them, which are powerful hallucinogen. You know, it has been observed that it can be absorbed through the skin. If you're interested at all in psychedelic plants, then do read The Long Trip. Again, just like the book you just mentioned, has a lot of useful information, but also is a really interesting read. So, but I think one of the things I really wanted to talk about with Belladonna was not just using it as flying ointment. It's an awesome flying ointment, you know, but it can be really strong and people can make a lot of mistakes with it. So, you know, as an ointment, and it's not for everyone. Not, you know, there's a lot of health indications with Belladonna, so I encourage you, if you're thinking about using it topically or internally, you know, please look those up and don't take our advice on it, because it's just, you have to be your own person when it comes to these really serious plants.
Yep, definitely.
We're not doctors, but there's lots of other things you can use Belladonna for. Rue, you've spoken about using it in inks.
Yeah, so Nightshade berries in general, and not just the Atropa belladonna, but a lot of the other belladonnas as well. All of their little blackberries make these absolutely beautiful shades for ink. And so, again, this one is quite toxic, so you can absorb it through the skin. So try to be quite careful when you are working with it. And I tend to have a mortar and pestle for different things and different reasons, and I have one that is for my poisonous plants, so I don't accidentally grind up my rosemary for dinner in the exact same mortar and pestle. But
good plan.
I've worked with it a few times in the past in making magical inks for writing down sigils and things that I've made on parchments, working with spells, that either you're putting that intent into that sigil and then putting as well that plant's energy into it, then either being able to burn it or keep it in your pocket or those sorts of things. But it is such a powerful spirit with this particular plant that I find it works absolute wonders. And as we did, I don't know if we touched on it before, that the name comes from the three fates in Greek mythology, the goddess of fate, where Clotho, Lachesis, and Atropos, which Atropa belladonna is named after, she cut the strings of fate and was generally associated with death. So it is an amazing plant for working with either the dead or for walking across that veil, but also why she is so deadly. But an amazing spirit to work with, and I find works so well as an ink for sigils.
Yeah, that's great. And I think also, you know, just riffing off that endings thing and inks, you know, whether you use it as part of that things you need to let go of and get rid of in your life, and using it as to write down those things and then burning them or things like that. But on the cutting the cords, I think one of the things that it can be very useful for is anointing blades for use in magical ritual that you're actually going to use to cut through either poppets representing someone, you know, to cut the ties with someone, or you could cut through a cord tied to someone if cutting through the middle of a poppet is a bit too brutal for you. I don't mind the brutal edge of things. So, you know, or using it to anoint scissors, if you want to cut cloth that might be used to bind something. So maybe you've had a binding that you did, and you know, you might have bound a poppet or something, and you've used a certain piece of cloth or a piece of cord or something. You might want to take the scissors, anoint them with belladonna, either an oil made from the roots or even just a cut leaf or something like that, being, again, careful not to absorb it through your skin, and then cut the cord to end that spell, you know, symbolically as well.
It's a really great way of looking at it too, because I think sometimes we all sort of get caught up in the word death, and death being quite a literal sense. But when we think about it more in, like we were saying before, with divination, and in this case with belladonna, with such a strong association with death, all it really means in a sense is the end of something. So yeah, like you said, it's even a great way of, you want to remove someone from your life, or say you're still caught up in an exorcist drama or something like that, or someone you just can't get rid of and want to cut ties with them, I absolutely love that idea of anointing a blade and cutting those ties is absolutely genius.
It's just working through those associations, and I think that's really important because we can become so caught up in what we're told to do by magical books and other magic practitioners that we don't spend our time extending our practice by working things ourselves, so to really just spend time with things and take the time to go, what else can I use this for, rather than just being told what to do. On flight, I think Belladonna has a lot of associations with shape-shifting, and a lot of the flying ointments was saying that the witch would shift into a different shape and fly off to the witch's sabbat and things like that, and whether it's a hare or a toad or an owl, whichever. But one of and they're all very cool, right? It's very cool to be a hare. It's very cool to be an owl, and it's all very romantic and witchy. But one of the things I really love is there's a guy called Porter. He wrote on using Belladonna that part of his experience was this: I am the grease bird, eating grass, goose-like. I shall peck upon the ground. I shall become fish-fingered, fin-handed, fling out my arms and fly underwater. I shall float up and down and fly down ere I die. And I said, I really like that quote. It takes the romanticism we often associate with flying ointments and shows that some of the experiences can be quite mundane. I can become a goose. And I think that's really relevant with Belladonna, because if you use it badly, you really are a goose. But shape-shifting is a really great way to use the plant, and I think that in incenses it has a lot of potential for aiding that shape-shifting feel, and also working as a gate to cross the veil.
Yeah, definitely.
So it has a lot of associations through lots of history. So there's lots of books you can pick up that talk about the history of using Belladonna, like all the Germans, so there's Claudia Miller, Ebeling, Christian Ratch, and Wolf Dieter Stahl's Witchcraft Medicine. Highly recommended. You should read these books if you're at all interested in these really hardcore plants. And I don't say hardcore in a cool way. I mean, it's hardcore. You need to know what you're working with. So, those sort of things. There's a beautiful painting by an English symbolist called Frederick Sandy that is called The Primordial Witch, and it depicts Medea making a potion with Belladonna in it, and she has a toad, and it's just one of those gorgeous, gorgeous pieces of artwork, which I'll probably try to post on our Instagram. It's really funny because, again, it's that romanticism of the witch, and it's the witch we all want to be, Medea. Well, for me anyway, she's the witch I want to be. I mean, she's a nut job. So maybe I don't want to be a nut job, but she was a plant person.
But that's the thing I think out of all of the herbs, the most romanticized one and the most associated with witches just think of, even in children's cartoons or anything, I feel like anytime there's a magical potion or something, there's always the words deadly nightshade on it. It's just got that alluringness to it that it's so beautiful but so deadly at the same time. It's just become, I think, the epitome of witches' herbalism.
Yeah, it's become part of our sort of association as sort of modern traditional witches. It seems to be almost a prerequisite, and I definitely don't think it is a prerequisite. It's just one of the more romantic plants that we've become associated with. One of the other things I've found really good with Belladonna is the roots. So propagating Belladonna, the seeds are quite hard to germinate. So definitely the straight up Atropa Belladonnas. There's a few variants that are a lot easier to germinate from seed, especially the yellow variant, which is lutea. But the standard Belladonna I find quite hard to germinate from seed. It may just be where I am. But you can divide it quite easily, root division. So I wait until they die back, which mine have already started to do. It's been a bit of a odd summer. And I take the plant out and I look at the roots and go, look where I can pull them out into different plants, look for a strong central root to cut out. So belladonnas don't have tap roots, so as such it will make a lot of strong roots. Not a very fibrous root mass either, but really good to divide and really quite easy to divide into good plants. I try to find a nice budding top and cut around that. So, but the roots are really great for drawing spirits into because they're not huge. So, you go get a parsley root or something like that and it's nearly a foot long and you've got to store it somewhere. Whereas a belladonna root, I found that I can find ones that are, about 7 or 8 centimetres once they're dried. So they're probably, 10 to 15 before drying, and then you dry them and they become 7 or 8 centimetres. Oh, dry them with heat because they do rot. Like they're quite a fleshy root. So definitely dry them with some heat. So either in an oven with the light on, not actually heat, or in a dehydrator will always work better, or on a really hot day when it's sunny. Otherwise, they go mouldy. And don't put fresh fruit into oil. Again, botulism. Not that you're going to ingest it, but they also go really mouldy.
I've had a few oil sullied that way in the past by trial and error.
Yeah, it's just too much moisture in that root. But they're really great to hold spirits. So, you can ask a spirit to take up residence in the root. If you can do that, make sure you look after it. Look after the spirit. Don't just put it in the root and leave it there and don't do anything with it. They're good to wear under your clothing once they're dried. I don't feel like they give off as much topical sort of effects once they're dried. But be careful. If you start to feel a little lightheaded or anything, definitely cease and desist. But yeah, I like that as a small version of the spirit root that you can carry around
sort
with
of,
you.
As you were saying earlier before we started recording as well, you mentioned an idea that was absolutely perfect for the fact that we are coming into Samhain and something that working with the ancestors like we are with reading the bones, that it's a perfect way to say have a root on your ancestor altar as it is associated with death. So it is associated those that have passed, and to use it as a spirit house for attracting those ancestors to try and tie into reading the bones and Samhain as well. But yeah, please do remember to give your patrons offerings as it's only polite.
Just like friends, the friend that you never call is in most cases the friend that isn't really interested in helping you move house.
Exactly.
Right? I know in some cases the friend who never calls you might be the person who you can rely on for stuff. I can be that person. I often am the person that doesn't stay in touch, but can usually be relied on to help in emergencies. If it's not an emergency, don't call me though.
Disclaimer in the show.
I'm not one for small talk, and so I find it really hard, other people's issues hard going sometimes. So I see less of people, especially if they just want to whine and not do anything about their issues. I don't have patience for that.
No, not at all. I think we're sort of in the same boat of that.
Yeah. We're action witches.
That's it.
I feel like we should be posing Charlie's Angels.
Fingers held up like guns.
Yeah, I think in terms of the dead, that's really one of the things I want to focus on with Belladonna in the next month. We've got Samhain, whatever, coming up. I want to, as I was talking before, I was thinking about creating a gate. So I want to mix up a belladonna based incense and actually set it as a gate, so two senses either side, probably into a ritual space, just really walking through that, the veil and the thinness that it would create, that herb would create doing it. So I think that would be quite interesting
definitely,
as well.
I'd love to see the responses with that. And is Samhain something that you do regularly do something for annually, or?
Not so much. I mean, obviously we're getting very close to the equinox. I tend to do a lot of equinox work, but it's funny because Samhain's just one of those ones where it comes around and I always find myself doing something. I always find myself working with some spirit work or something like that. So while as I've said earlier in podcasts, I don't do Sabbats. I don't do the big major wheel of the year kind of thing. I do always find myself doing something on Samhain. And I guess that's probably, again, part of the romanticism of witchcraft. I feel like it is just the right time.
And I mean, who doesn't love Halloween?
And exactly. Exactly. And I do wish that, it's one of those times that you kind of get a bit annoyed at how America and the Northern Hemisphere get to have it on Halloween.
Yeah.
On the commercial expanse of Halloween. And so they get to tap into that popular culture energy as well, whereas we are at the other end of the year and we really have to look at the declining of the light, which can be hard because we have daylight saving. So we get that also extra boost. So I find that my practice sort of happens in a couple of stages. I'll often end up at midwinter and still be working on the things that I started at Samhain. So those sort of things happen much more for me. It's more of an equinox-based practice. I like that shift that happens in the earth.
Yeah, and I feel like you definitely still do pick up on it. And there is, I don't know, I'm not a big Sabbat practicer like you, but like you as well. Samhain's always one of those ones that I tend to do something for because it is quite special to me. But I do like those times where you do feel those shifts during the different year. You definitely do feel that you are stepping into almost a new world when you go from summer into autumn into winter.
And I think that's probably what I'll do. I'll start at the equinox. I'll start some work at the equinox, roll it into Samhain, and keep going.
Yeah.
From there. So, and of course, Easter is coming up. That's always an interesting time as well, because we really are talking about death and interestingly, I think it's almost better for us to use that death aspect of Easter. In the Northern Hemisphere, you have the rebirth, which is spring, and things like that. And we're not going to get into whether Easter is a pagan co-op or anything like that. But again, still just working with the popular activity of the world at that time, which is to look at the different rebirth and death and sacrifice and stuff like that. So, you don't have to be Christian, you don't have to be do the whole proper Easter thing, but there's just recognize that those energies are around and being reinforced through mass prayer and mass observation, and therefore they're there to work with.
And I mean, for us as well, being in the southern hemisphere, as you said, that we're focusing a bit more on death and rebirth here, and it sort of coincides perfectly with the fact that we are in autumn, which is our harvest period as well. So looking at the sacrifice that our plants are making and what we're harvesting, and sort of acknowledging that as well.
Yeah, that's a really good point. There is a lot of harvesting going on in my garden at the moment. We had a couple of touches of really hard heat, which have hurt a lot of my plants. So they've been having a lot of tender love and care, but they also just need to be cut back hard and hit with the scythe and see what comes back next year.
So back on the topic of Belladonna and harvesting as well, I'm curious is there a certain method that you personally go through? And I know we sort of spoke about it a little bit, I think, in the first episode, but especially for Belladonna, is there a method that you do, since you are so close with this plant, before using it or growing it or anything like that?
I think there's a lot of flattery that goes on with Belladonna. She likes to be told that she's beautiful. She likes to be involved in things. She loves offerings of aphrodisiacs and sexual fluids. Sorry, cat's shaking his bell there. She likes expensive things, expensive resins, expensive perfumes, and that bit of sex and love always works really well with her. I generally try to give her an offering of something expensive before I harvest her. She likes to grow. The best ones I've grown have had morning sun, and this year actually the berry harvest has been absolutely incredible. I've had so many berries. I think that the most important things with Belladonna are that she likes pretty things, and expensive things and things that are rich.
And so are those things, for example, that you do tend to offer her being expensive, pretty things, are they things that do biodegrade, or are they physical objects, and how do you sort of give them to her, and then do you leave them in her property, or do you give them to her for a set period? Or
tend to use things on her, so I'll either anoint her pot with perfume, or I'll, if it's a crystal I'm going to leave there, I'll anoint it with the expensive perfume and put it at her base. And then I just sort of let crystals sit there, and they'll go into the earth as I repot and things like that. Sometimes then they'll get recharged and put back. And sometimes I'll know that they're there and know that I need something for a spell that needs both Belladonna's aspects and the crystal aspects, and I'll go ask her if I can use them. And sometimes she says yes, and sometimes she says no, my pretties. But I wash her. Often will put like a nice, especially if I have a sweet wine. I like dessert wines. So if I have a sweet wine and I'll take some and I'll mix it with a little water and I'll wash her leaves with it. Or I'll sprinkle some around the ground. She likes care and attention. You have to treat her like the most beautiful woman. So generally I use things that can be left and just are fugitive. So, beautiful incenses. I'll just found that at some of the Greek delis, they've got these really small incense discs, charcoal discs. And while I always prefer to use the non-self-igniting ones, sometimes it's just easier to use the self-igniting ones. So I burn those, let them burn off their first awful strong scent. And then I put my expensive resins on them and let them sit under her. I make these little clay bowls and just leave those out there because they burn off in about 15 minutes.
Yeah, awesome.
So it's not really too
I
much
tend to do the same thing I find with those little charcoal discs, like you said. Then there's those special occasions and bring out the expensive resins. That's the time to use them. That's awesome. That's a really great way of looking at it. I especially love the idea of the crystals and letting them sort of go into the ground and absorb those. That's an absolutely beautiful idea.
Yeah. And she's a really important plant to me. So it's important that I treat her, I guess, the way I like to be treated. I'm not I'm a little bit of a diva. My husband did take me out today and buy me pretty jewellery for my birthday. So, it's always nice to have pretty things. And, I think that's something I identify with her. She's showy. I mean, those berries are just showy.
That's it. They glisten, and there's that little bit of hue of almost a black purple, and they're just absolutely captivating. And the flowers too, with that dusky sort of rose color. She is a very beautiful plant.
Yep, and even in the heat, I found that her leaves have been turning this really dark, mottly purple with the heat that we've been having, and just so gorgeous. But yeah, she's an interesting plant. I do recommend you. They're actually quite easy to grow in a pot. If you can get one, do. If you can only get a piece of dried root to try and connect with, do. Use the leaves as an incense. Use the berries as a very strong incense. Use the berries as charms and parts of divination work, like I intend to do. And yeah, just get to know her.
Exactly. And I mean, I think that she is one of those powerful spirits too, that even then if you don't have access to it, just setting up an altar dedicated to her, she'll generally come through if you sort of know the right way to attract her.
Yeah, and I was just thinking, my favourite person, Gordon White, often talks about plants that are on a mission. And I think that her mission has been to sort of entrance us again, or enchant us again with the romanticism of those more deadly plants. While it sort of might seem not as significant as ayahuasca, who has such a direct and volatile change on personalities, she still has a place in our magic. And I don't think a lot of witches who are interested in spirit flight and things like that could jump right in with hardcore things like ayahuasca and churras and things, whereas Belladonna is slightly an easier step, even just as a working plant. Like, I know you work with churras, but I struggle. Like, there's too many edges to them for me.
Yeah, I think that's part of the charm in my eyes, is I'm quite fond of those edges.
So what are you going to do with Belladonna this month?
So I think the main attraction is definitely using a bit of her root as that spirit house, especially coming up to Samhain is my main thing. But I've been really quite captivated with your little explanation there about her allure and all that, and how you work with her and all those pretty things, and just completely summarizing her as the spirit. And I really, really, really like that. So I think I just want to work with her a bit more heavily than I have in the past. I've sort of done the bad thing of always just sort of used her for my own means, and I'd like to, I think, just sort of get a bit closer to her just to form a bit better of a relationship as well.
Yep, I'm definitely going to do some of that that crossing the veil incense work this month, and I think that's really what I want to focus on, and I want to use her in my divination and my bone sets as well. So I think that's where I'm going to keep the focus this month. I know that work is going to be insane this month, so I've got to keep my commitments pretty low.
Yeah, awesome. Absolutely
excellent. Awesome. Well, I think that's just about it from us this month.
And I'd be really, really interested to hear, like we said, Instagram, seeing everyone's bone collections and just seeing even your other divination methods and knowing why you use these tools, how you use these tools, showing us some of your readings. Like, I'm just so fascinated with that, of connecting a bit more with people on Instagram.
Yeah, definitely. We'll see you all on there. I'd like to thank Belladonna for being here, not myself, the actual plant spirit, because she is my beautiful plant ally. Yeah, I think that's my main thank you, and thank you, Rue, for being here.
Thanks to you too, and yeah, of course, thank you to my ancestors, and yes, especially Belladonna.
Thanks to Michelle Jackson and Jason Miller. These books that we're working with have been really great, and we'll see you all in a month for a very special episode about working with spirits and what might be a very special plant.
Definitely. Until the next new moon.
See you soon.